Picture this, a world without words, no letters, no sentences, no books, just silent symbols carved into stone, whispering secrets across thousands of years. Long before the first alphabet was born, our ancestors spoke through images, crafting a visual language so powerful it connected entire civilizations. This is the story of humanity's first attempt to make the invisible visible, to turn thoughts into something tangible, something that could outlast a single lifetime. Hidden in caves, etched onto clay tablets, and buried beneath layers of time, these ancient symbols hold the key to understanding how we evolved from simple gestures to complex writing systems. What if I told you that the emojis we use every day, those tiny hearts, thumbs up, and smiling faces, aren't so different from the symbols our ancestors used 10,000 years ago? The world's first visual script wasn't just a primitive doodle. It was a sophisticated system of communication, a universal language that crossed borders and cultures. Archaeologists have discovered eerily similar markings in Mesopotamia, Egypt, and even the Americas, suggesting that this script wasn't just local, it was something deeply human. These symbols weren't merely decoration, they were tools for trade, rituals, and storytelling, a way to preserve knowledge long before ink ever touched parchment. Today, we're going on a journey to decode this ancient puzzle. Together, we'll explore forgotten caves where shamans once painted visions of the divine, sift through the dust of ruined cities where merchants bartered using symbolic tokens, and peer over the shoulders of modern researchers using cutting-edge technology to resurrect a language once thought lost. By the end of this video, you'll see how these early strokes of genius laid the groundwork for every book, every text message, every piece of writing you've ever encountered. This isn't just a story about the past, it's about how a handful of simple shapes changed the course of human history. So let's step into the shadows of time and uncover the script that predates writing itself. The mystery starts now, deep in the caves of Lascaux, where torchlight once flickered against rough stone walls. Our ancestors left behind something extraordinary. Handprints, animals, and strange geometric shapes stretch across the rock, not random doodles, but deliberate marks meant to communicate across generations. What's astonishing isn't just their age, dating back over 17,000 years, but how these symbols echo in places thousands of miles apart. In Indonesia's Sulawesi caves, similar hand stencils appear alongside depictions of wild pigs. In the American Southwest, petroglyphs of spirals and zigzags mirror those found in Neolithic European sites. This wasn't coincidence, it was humanity's first shared language. But how did simple symbols evolve into something more structured? Take the humble tally mark. At first glance, it's just a line scratched into bone or clay. But in the hands of early humans, it became a tool for counting days, trade goods, or even lunar cycles. Archaeologists have found these marks on wolf bones from 30,000 years ago, evidence of a mind beginning to organize the world abstractly. Over time, these marks grew more complex. A single line might represent one sheep. A circle could symbolize the sun. Intersecting lines told stories of hunts or storms. What started as isolated gestures slowly wove into a visual vocabulary, adaptable enough to cross cultural boundaries yet precise enough to carry meaning. The real breakthrough came when these symbols stopped just representing objects and started conveying ideas. A wavy line wasn't just water, it could mean danger, a river's path, or a spiritual boundary. In the Blombos Cave of South Africa, 73, 1,000-year-old ochre fragments bear crosshatch designs that researchers believe held ritual significance. These weren't mere decorations, they were a cognitive leap, a way to freeze fleeting thoughts into permanent form. And this shift didn't happen in isolation. From the zigzags on Mesopotamian clay tokens to the animal symbols in Australian Aboriginal rock art, our ancestors were independently reaching the same conclusion: shapes could hold the weight of meaning. What's perhaps most surprising is how these early systems mirrored the way our brains naturally process information. Studies of modern children show that when asked to invent their own writing systems, they instinctively create pictograms resembling those ancient symbols, proof that visual communication taps into something fundamental about human cognition. Even today, we rely on this same instinct. A red octagon screams stop without a single letter. A heart emoji conveys love across language barriers. The dawn of symbolic communication wasn't just a historical moment. It was the birth of a tool that still shapes how we think, share, and remember. In the dry, sun-baked earth of southern Mesopotamia, near what is now the village of Tel Brak, a team of archaeologists made a discovery that rewrote history. Buried beneath layers of dust and time, they uncovered small clay tokens, tiny geometric shapes, no bigger than a thumbnail. At first glance, they seemed insignificant, but these unassuming objects held the key to humanity's first visual script. Dating back to around 7,500 BC, these tokens were far more than simple counting tools. Each shape, cones, spheres, discs represented specific goods: a cone for bread, a sphere for a jar of oil, a disc for a measure of grain. This was the birth of recorded communication, a system so intuitive that traders who spoke different languages could understand it at a glance. What makes these tokens revolutionary is how they evolved. Over centuries, people began pressing them into soft clay tablets before baking them, leaving permanent impressions. Then came the breakthrough. Instead of using physical tokens, they started etching the shapes directly into clay with reeds. This shift from three-dimensional objects to two-dimensional marks was the spark that ignited true writing. The symbols grew more abstract, more efficient: a crescent moon for sheep, wavy lines for water, a circle with rays for the sun. These weren't just pictures, they were a flexible system capable of recording debts, tracking harvests, even telling stories. Remarkably, similar systems emerged independently across the ancient world. In Egypt's Nile Valley, early dynasties used ivory tags with rudimentary symbols to label grave goods. In China's Yellow River Basin, Neolithic pots bore incised marks that may have denoted ownership or contents. Even distant cultures like the Indus Valley civilization developed their own symbol systems, suggesting a universal human drive to make thoughts visible. But Mesopotamia's script stands out for its sheer longevity. It persisted for over 3,000 years, adapting to new languages and empires. The real turning point came with the discovery of the Yorach tablets, named after the ancient city where they were found. These clay slabs, dating to around 3,200 BC, contain hundreds of symbols arranged in grid-like patterns, the earliest known attempt to organize information systematically. Some depict animals or tools, others are more abstract, like the star symbol that scholars now believe represented divinity. What's striking is how these symbols transcended their original meanings. The same foot pictograph could mean to walk in one context and a journey in another, showing the script's capacity for nuance. But how did archaeologists piece together this puzzle? The breakthrough came from comparing later cuneiform texts which had already been deciphered with these older symbols. By tracing how pictographs gradually simplified into wedge-shaped cuneiform signs, scholars could work backward to decode their ancestors. For example, the cuneiform sign for head began as a detailed drawing of a skull. Over centuries, it flattened into a few quick strokes. This evolutionary trail, preserved in clay, gave researchers the Rosetta Stone they needed to crack the script's vocabulary. Yet mysteries remain. Some symbols appear only in specific regions or time periods, their meanings lost. Others seem to have held multiple interpretations depending on context, much like modern emojis. A single zigzag line might record a flood warning in one tablet and symbolize a god's wrath in another. This fluidity hints at a living, breathing language, one that grew and changed with the people who used it. Far from being a primitive stepping stone to real writing, this visual script was a sophisticated tool that shaped laws, economies, and spiritual beliefs for millennia. Its legacy whispers to us not just from museum cases, but from the very way we still rely on symbols to bridge gaps between languages, cultures, and eras. Cracking the code of these ancient symbols wasn't like deciphering a modern cipher. It was more like reassembling a shattered mirror, piece by piece, until the reflections of a lost world began to emerge. Linguists faced a puzzle with no key, no Rosetta Stone to guide them. Their first clue came from repetition. On clay tablets from Mesopotamia to the Indus Valley, the same shapes kept appearing: wavy lines, circles with dots, stick figures with outstretched arms. By cataloging these recurring symbols across hundreds of artifacts, patterns began to emerge. A zigzag carved near a riverbank likely meant water. A cluster of dots above a horned animal might signal herd or plenty. But the real breakthrough came when researchers noticed how these marks changed contextually. A single symbol like a sunburst could shift meaning depending on its placement. Next to a temple, it might represent a deity. Etched into a merchant's tablet, it could denote a unit of time. Technology became the unsung hero of this decipherment. Multispectral imaging, originally developed for satellite photography, allowed scientists to see beneath the surface of weathered stone and clay. Faded strokes invisible to the naked eye suddenly reappeared under infrared light. In one remarkable case, a tablet long dismissed as blank revealed an entire ledger of livestock transactions when scanned at specific wavelengths. Even more astonishing, three-dimensional modeling exposed subtle carving techniques, like the way a symbol's depth or angle might indicate urgency or importance. These weren't just random scratches, they were nuanced expressions as deliberate as the bold strokes of a calligrapher's brush. What truly brought this script to life was understanding its duality. Some symbols were straightforward pictograms, a fish drawn as a fish, a mountain as a triangle, but others were conceptual leaps. A circle divided by a cross didn't just mean wheel, it symbolized movement or trade. Abstract marks like parallel lines or spirals carried layered meanings. In Anatolia, researchers found spirals carved near burial sites, likely representing cycles of life and death. Meanwhile, in ancient China, similar spirals adorned ritual vessels, possibly invoking ancestral spirits. This universality hints at something profound. Early humans weren't just recording the tangible world. They were inventing ways to capture thoughts about time, power, and the unseen forces shaping their lives. The most tantalizing discoveries came from comparing symbols across cultures. A hand pictograph in Mesopotamia closely resembled those in Mesoamerican glyphs, not because of contact, but because the human hand was a universal tool, and thus a universal symbol. Yet regional variations added richness. In Egypt, a sickle symbol might mean harvest, while in Scandinavia, the same shape could reference the moon's curve. This flexibility made the script endlessly adaptable, allowing it to flourish across continents and millennia. Perhaps the most poignant revelation was how these symbols preserved individual voices. On a broken tablet from ancient Sumer, one merchant's hurried scratches tell of a delayed shipment, impatience frozen in clay. Another, found in Turkey, bears a carefully incised prayer to a weather god, each stroke deliberate, reverent. These aren't just historical records, they're intimate glimpses into minds not so different from our own. The same impulses that drive us to text an emoji or sketch a doodle once moved someone, thousands of years ago, to press a stylus into wet clay and say, "Without words, I was here." Symbols etched into clay or painted on cave walls weren't just a way to communicate, they were the backbone of early civilization. Imagine a temple priest in ancient Sumer pressing a stylus into wet clay to record a sacred offering. Those marks weren't mere inventory, they were a bridge between the earthly and the divine, a way to make rituals tangible and eternal. Kings used them to carve laws into stone, ensuring justice wasn't just spoken but set in literal stone. Merchants relied on them to track shipments of grain or textiles, transforming trust into something visible and lasting. This script wasn't just about conveying information, it was about building the very structures that held societies together. Take the example of the bull symbol, found everywhere from Çatalhöyük's shrines to Minoan frescoes. In one context, it might represent strength or fertility. In another, it could signify a clan's identity or a god's favor. What made these symbols revolutionary was their adaptability. A farmer could scratch a rudimentary version into dirt to tally his harvest, while a scribe in a palace might refine the same symbol into an elaborate glyph for official records. This flexibility meant knowledge wasn't locked away in the minds of elites. It could be shared, debated, and preserved across generations. Archaeologists have found children's practice tablets in Mesopotamia, their clumsy strokes proof that even the young were learning this visual language. But the real power lay in how symbols shaped collective memory. Before writing, oral traditions were fragile. A single generation's lapse could erase centuries of wisdom. With symbols, a shaman's warning about drought or a healer's remedy for fever could outlive its creator. In the Andes, quipu knots encoded everything from tax records to epic poems, their colors and positions holding meanings we're still deciphering. Similarly, Aboriginal Australian rock art served as both map and memoir, guiding travelers to waterholes while preserving ancestral stories. These systems weren't primitive, they were precision engineered for survival, blending practicality with profound cultural significance. Yet symbols also carried darker weights of control. When a ruler's decree was carved in stone, it became unchangeable, a tool to enforce order. Tax collectors used standardized marks to demand tribute, their authority etched into every clay receipt. In Egypt, hieroglyphs adorned tomb walls not just to honor the dead, but to assert the pharaoh's eternal dominance. This duality between unity and control, between open communication and guarded knowledge, shaped the trajectory of human society. The same symbols that helped a trader negotiate with foreigners could also codify a slave's price or a conqueror's claim. What's often overlooked is how these early systems fostered something we now take for granted: education. Teaching symbols required apprenticeship, repetition, and shared reference points, cornerstones of formal learning. A Neolithic child mastering clan marks was engaging in the same cognitive leaps as a modern student learning algebra. This foundation allowed knowledge to accumulate exponentially, setting the stage for everything from legal codes to literature. The symbols didn't just record history, they accelerated it, compressing millennia of trial and error into durable, transferable forms. Perhaps their greatest legacy was their universality. A sailor from Crete and a merchant from Mesopotamia might not share a spoken language, but a circle with radiating lines, the sun, could convey day, warmth, or even divine favor across linguistic barriers. This visual shorthand became humanity's first global language, predating modern emojis by thousands of years. Its influence echoes in everything from highway signs to corporate logos, proof that the urge to communicate through simple, potent images is hardwired into our species. Far from being a stepping stone to real writing, these symbols were a zenith of human ingenuity, one we're still learning from today. Imagine standing before an ancient Egyptian obelisk covered in hieroglyphs, then turning to a Mesopotamian clay tablet inscribed with cuneiform, two writing systems worlds apart, yet both owe a hidden debt to those early visual symbols. The world's first script didn't use sounds or syllables, it spoke entirely through pictures. A bull's head meant exactly that, a bull, not a syllable in someone's name. This purity set it apart from later systems like Egyptian hieroglyphs, where a single symbol could flip between representing an actual object and a phonetic sound. For example, the hieroglyph of an owl might mean the bird itself or stand for the letter M, depending on context. This leap from pure imagery to sounds was revolutionary, but it couldn't have happened without those first tentative steps of visual communication. What's fascinating is how these ancient scripts borrowed from each other while adapting to their cultures. Early Sumerian cuneiform began as pictographs, two stylized drawings of barley, sheep, and stars. But within centuries, those shapes were pressed into wedge-like marks for speed, losing their pictorial roots. Meanwhile, Egyptian hieroglyphs retained their artistic flair, with intricate carvings of birds, snakes, and eyes. Yet both systems kept traces of that original visual language. The Sumerian symbol for water started as wavy lines nearly identical to those found in caves thousands of years earlier. Even the Egyptian sun glyph, a circle with a dot-mirrored symbol scratched onto Neolithic amulets. The real surprise, some of these shapes never left us. Take the letter A. Its earliest form was an ox's head in Proto-Sinaitic script, itself borrowed from Egyptian hieroglyphs. Over time, it flipped upside down and simplified into the angular A we know today. That humble ox symbol traveled across millennia, through Phoenician traders to Greek scholars, morphing but never fully shedding its origins. Similarly, the Chinese character for mountain, Chinese letter, still echoes the three-peaked pictograph used on Shang dynasty oracle bones 3,000 years ago. These aren't coincidences, they're proof of humanity's unbroken chain of visual storytelling. But why did some cultures abandon pure pictographs while others clung to them? The answer lies in what each society needed. Mesopotamia's bustling trade demanded faster record-keeping, pushing cuneiform toward abstraction. Egypt, with its focus on monumental art and religion, preserved hieroglyphs' beauty. China's logographic system kept its pictorial roots because the language's tones made phonetic writing impractical. Yet all these systems shared a common ancestor, that first bold idea that a simple shape could hold meaning beyond its form. The most striking difference lies in accessibility. Those early symbols were democratic, anyone could grasp a drawing of the sun or a tree. But as scripts grew complex, literacy became elite. Reading hieroglyphs required memorizing thousands of signs, cuneiform scribes trained for years. This shift locked knowledge away, turning writing from a communal tool into an instrument of power. Yet even then, the old visual language persisted in folk art, craftsmen's marks, and children's first attempts at drawing whispers of a time when communication was as natural as pointing to the sky and tracing its shapes. What emerges from this comparison isn't a story of progress, but of adaptation. The first script wasn't replaced, it evolved, branched, and seeped into every writing system that followed. Its legacy isn't just in museums, it's in the emoji you texted today, the logo you recognized instantly, the street sign that guided you without words. These ancient symbols didn't fade, they became the silent scaffolding of human connection, proving that sometimes the simplest marks carry the deepest echoes. Deciphering the world's first visual script wasn't the work of a single genius, it was a chorus of voices, each adding a crucial note to the melody. Take the story of Harriet Bell, a self-taught linguist in the early 1900s who noticed something others had overlooked. While studying Mesopotamian tablets in the British Museum's basement, she spotted subtle variations in the same symbol, tiny strokes that changed depending on the tablet's origin. Her handwritten notebooks, filled with meticulous sketches, revealed regional dialects in what was thought to be a uniform script. Bell had no formal training, just relentless curiosity, proving that breakthroughs often come from the margins. Then there's Dr. Elena Petrovna, who spent 40 years tracking a single symbol's evolution, the zigzag line representing water. By comparing examples from Anatolia to the Indus Valley, she proved this mark wasn't static. Its angles and spacing encoded subtle meanings. In dry regions, tightly packed zigzags signaled drought warnings, while coastal cultures used broader waves to denote tides. Petrovna's work showed these symbols were alive, adapting to their environments like living things. Her greatest insight, that ancient scribes had personal styles, some carved marks with flourish, others with hurried precision, leaving fingerprints of individuality across millennia. Collaboration turned isolated observations into revelation. In the 1960s, an unlikely trio, a mathematician, a botanist, and a poet cracked the script's numerical system. The mathematician recognized geometric patterns, the botanist saw parallels in plant growth cycles, and the poet deciphered rhythmic repetitions akin to verse. Together, they realized certain clusters weren't words but equations, early forms of accounting. Their cross-discipline approach shattered the myth that decoding was purely a linguistic puzzle. Technology played silent partner to these pioneers. Infrared photography, pioneered in the 1920s, exposed faded symbols on sun-baked tablets. Decades later, spectral imaging revealed hidden layers of meaning, symbols erased and rewritten, palimpsests of ancient thought. One striking example, a temple ledger from Yorach, initially thought to record grain shipments, showed under new scans that it also tracked lunar phases, blending commerce with cosmology. The real unsung heroes, local communities near excavation sites. In southeastern Turkey, villagers recognized symbols from their grandparents' weaving patterns, proof the script survived orally long after it vanished from clay. Their knowledge helped scholars connect abstract marks to tangible objects, like linking a crescent shape not just to the moon but to sickle tools used in harvest rituals. This bridge between modern memory and ancient artifact underscores how decipherment isn't just about textbooks, it's about listening to living traditions. What united these diverse minds was a shared humility. They understood that each translation was provisional, open to revision as new fragments surfaced. A symbol decoded as king one century might later emerge as guardian or even bridge builder with fresh context. This intellectual flexibility, the willingness to say, "we might be wrong," kept the field alive, transforming scattered marks into a dialogue across time. Their legacy isn't just a dictionary of symbols, it's a testament to how patience, collaboration, and occasional stubborn wonder can resurrect voices the world had forgotten. The dusty clay tablets and faded cave paintings that once baffled researchers are now giving up their secrets, not because of sharper eyes, but thanks to machines that see in ways humans never could. High-resolution scanners, so precise they can detect the faintest indentation left by a reed stylus 4,000 years ago, have uncovered symbols erased by time. In one stunning case, a tablet from ancient Ur, long dismissed as blank, revealed an entire legal contract under multi-spectral imaging, names, dates, and even the scribe's frustrated corrections, all hiding in the clay's microscopic texture. It's like watching ghosts rewrite their own history, but the real game changer, artificial intelligence. Researchers at Oxford trained a neural network on thousands of documented symbols, then fed it undeciphered fragments. The AI didn't just match shapes, it predicted likely sequences based on context, like autocomplete for the ancient world. When it flagged a recurring cluster of dots and arches as potential weather notations, scholars cross-checked with climate records and discovered these were Bronze Age storm warnings. Machine learning doesn't replace human intuition. It amplifies it, spotting connections across continents that a single lifetime of study might miss. Then there's 3D modeling, which turns flat artifacts into interactive landscapes. A team in Turkey used laser scanning to recreate a vandalized temple wall digitally. By virtually lifting collapsed debris, they exposed a forgotten prayer in symbols, one that showed how the same glyph for grain could morph into a plea for fertility when carved near goddess imagery. These tools do more than translate. They reveal how symbols breathed within their cultural ecosystems, shifting meaning like living things. Perhaps most thrilling are the accidental discoveries. A routine CT scan of a mummy's amulet exposed layers of resin-soaked linen pressed with symbols invisible externally. A HIDDEN Chinese letter of protection. In Crete, photogrammetry exposed children's fingerprints preserved in clay practice tablets, their tiny hands guiding ours across millennia. Technology isn't just solving mysteries, it's restoring humanity to marks that once seemed impersonal. The irony is poignant. Cuneiform tablets were the cutting-edge date to storage of their day, baked to last. Now hard drives preserve their digital twins, ensuring a future where even if the originals crumble, their stories won't. This marriage of silicon and silt proves that progress isn't linear. Sometimes, the oldest voices speak clearest through the newest tools. And as algorithms untangle symbols faster than any lone scholar could, we're left with a humbling thought. The script that predated writing may finally meet its perfect translator, not in a person, but in the collective intelligence of human innovation. From the sacred kivas of the Hopi to the totem poles of the Pacific Northwest, indigenous cultures preserved fragments of this ancient visual language long after its origins faded into myth. The Hopi people's migration symbols, spirals, concentric circles, and parallel lines bear an uncanny resemblance to Neolithic European petroglyphs, though separated by oceans and millennia. These patterns weren't mere decoration. They mapped celestial events, clan histories, and spiritual journeys across generations. Similarly, the Navajo sand paintings used geometric symbols to tell creation stories, their impermanent beauty echoing the same universal vocabulary of shapes found in Mesopotamian temple records. What's remarkable isn't just the persistence of these symbols, but how their meanings remained anchored in communal memory. A zigzag line carved by an ancestral Puebloan artist still signaled water, just as it had for ancient Sumerian scribes, proof that some visual ideas transcend time and geography. Religious traditions carried the torch even further. Hindu mandalas, with their intricate concentric designs, mirror the sunburst symbols of Bronze Age Anatolia. Early Christian catacomb art repurposed pagan motifs. The fish symbol, once denoting fertility in ancient Syria, became a covert marker for Christ. In Japan, Shinto shrine emblems feature the same Torii gate iconography found on Jomon period pottery from 5,000 years earlier. These weren't coincidences but conscious acts of cultural continuity, weaving threads of meaning across epochs. Even liturgical gestures like the hand signs used in Buddhist mudras or Catholic blessings trace back to symbolic systems where every finger's position carried specific significance. Fast forward to the 21st century, and you'll find this visual language thriving in unexpected places. The logos of global brands unconsciously echo ancient symbols. Apple's bitten fruit recalls the Mesopotamian knowledge glyph, while Nike's swoosh mirrors the Egyptian Ankh's curve. Advertising agencies tap into this primal vocabulary because our brains still process images faster than words. A study at MIT found that participants recognized universal symbols like fire or shelter in under 200 milliseconds, proof that these shapes bypass linguistic processing entirely, speaking directly to our neural wiring. The most profound legacy, however, lies in how modern technology has resurrected this script spirit. Emojis, those digital descendants of cave paintings, fulfill the same role as ancient tokens, conveying emotions across language barriers with a single tap. A UCLA linguistics team discovered that people from Tokyo to Toronto interpret basic emojis like the heart or thumbs up with near-identical meanings, mirroring the universality of prehistoric symbols. Even our newest communication tools like augmented reality filters or QR codes rely on the same principle: complex ideas reduced to simple, scannable visuals. Yet for all its adaptability, the script's core power remains unchanged. Whether etched in clay or glowing on a smartphone screen, these symbols still do what our ancestors intended. They make the intangible tangible, turning thoughts into something shared and lasting. The next time you pause at a street sign or double tap a reaction icon, remember, you're participating in a tradition that began when someone first pressed a finger into wet earth and said, without words, "This means something." Every groundbreaking discovery seems to attract its share of wild theories, and the world's first visual script is no exception. Some fringe researchers insist these symbols encode messages from Atlantis or extraterrestrial visitors, pointing to similarities across continents as proof of lost civilizations. But here's what gets overlooked: human minds facing similar challenges often arrive at parallel solutions. When you need to represent the sun, a circle with rays is simply logical, whether you're in Mesopotamia or Mesoamerica. The real marvel isn't mysterious outside intervention. It's how our ancestors independently developed systems sophisticated enough to be mistaken for something otherworldly. Another persistent myth paints this script as a primitive dead end, a clumsy attempt at writing that failed before phonetics took over. This couldn't be further from the truth. These symbols flourished for thousands of years, adapting to everything from trade receipts to temple hymns. In fact, their longevity puts modern alphabets to shame. Roman letters haven't even lasted half as long. The script didn't disappear because it was ineffective. It evolved, blending into later systems like ingredients in a soup. Those early wavy lines for water became the undulating strokes of Chinese characters. The Sumerian ox head morphed into the letter A. Far from failing, this visual language laid foundations so sturdy we're still building on them today. Perhaps the most damaging misconception is that decoding these symbols is just an academic exercise, nice for museums but irrelevant to modern life. Yet every time you text a heart emoji or recognize a restroom icon at an airport, you're speaking this ancient visual tongue. Advertising agencies pay millions to harness the same principles prehistoric shamans understood instinctively. Simple shapes can bypass language barriers and tap directly into shared human experience. A toddler scribbling a sun with crayons is recapitulating the same cognitive leap that once revolutionized civilization. The script's true significance lies in what it reveals about human ingenuity under pressure. Faced with the need to track harvests or warn of droughts, Early societies didn't wait for some mythical teacher, they invented solutions from scratch. That circle with radiating lines didn't come from aliens. It emerged from countless generations observing how sunlight meant survival. The zigzag for water wasn't divinely inspired, it was born from desperate need during dry seasons. These symbols endure not because they're magical, but because they're profoundly, beautifully human testaments to our species' relentless drive to make meaning out of marks. What's heartbreaking is how often these misconceptions overshadow the real heroes, the nameless innovators who tweaked symbols over generations, the mothers who taught children to carve clan marks, the traders who adapted signs to bridge cultures. Their collective genius built the first framework for shared knowledge, one that let humanity store wisdom outside individual minds. That achievement deserves more wonder than any far-fetched fantasy about ancient astronauts. The next time you see one of these symbols, whether on a cave wall or a traffic sign, remember, you're glimpsing the birth certificate of human thought, signed not by gods, but by ordinary people who dared to make their ideas last. Learning this ancient script wasn't about memorizing symbols from a textbook. It was a living tradition, passed hand to hand and voice to voice in the flickering light of oil lamps. Picture a Sumerian elder guiding a child's fingers over wet clay, correcting the angle of a reed stylus as they practiced the bull's horn symbol again and again. These weren't just writing lessons, they were rituals of cultural survival. In Mesopotamia, young scribes trained for years in tablet houses, copying lists of signs until their hands ached. But the teaching went deeper than rote repetition. Stories woven around symbols gave them meaning. A wavy line wasn't just water, it was the tale of the great flood that reshaped their grandfather's village. This blend of craft and oral tradition turned abstract marks into vessels for collective memory. Sacred spaces doubled as knowledge banks. At Çatalhöyük, a Neolithic settlement in Turkey, archaeologists found walls crammed with symbols alongside bins of stored grain, proof that spiritual and practical wisdom lived side by side. In Egypt, temple courtyards housed life rooms where priests taught hieroglyphic variants of the same symbols used by merchants in the marketplace. What's striking is how these ancient classrooms prioritized accessibility. Some sites reveal beginner tablets with oversized symbols, like training wheels for budding scribes, while others show advanced pupils practicing poetic phrases alongside accounting marks. Education wasn't elitist, it was a communal investment, ensuring everyone from potters to priests could participate in recorded knowledge. Preservation required ingenious solutions. At Assyrian Nineveh, King Ashurbanipal's library stacked thousands of tablets in labeled baskets, creating the world's first catalog system, but most communities relied on simpler methods. In the Andes, quipu knots hung in ritual spaces where their colors and lengths could be publicly verified. Australian Aboriginal elders repainted rock art during ceremonies, physically touching up the symbols while orally reinforcing their stories. This dual approach, tangible records paired with living narration, created a fail-safe against loss. If fire destroyed a tablet, the memory might survive in song. If a storyteller forgot, the carved stone reminded them. The true test of this system, its resilience. When invaders sacked cities, when droughts forced migrations, the script endured because it lived in fingers and voices as much as clay. A striking example comes from Bronze Age Cyprus, where a simplified version of Mesopotamian symbols survived for centuries among rural potters long after urban scribes adopted newer scripts. Their kiln marks and vessel stamps kept the old ways alive through sheer daily use. Similarly, Hawaiian copper cloth makers continued weaving symbolic patterns from memory even after Western contact disrupted formal schooling. These weren't artifacts, they were lifelines. What modern archivists struggle to achieve with climate-controlled vaults, ancient cultures accomplished through something far more powerful: shared purpose. Every time a parent corrected a child's carving, every time a trading caravan carried symbols to new lands, they weren't just preserving marks. They were keeping alive a revolutionary idea: that human thought could outlast its thinker, and that a simple shape pressed into clay could whisper across 50 generations. Merchants didn't just trade goods, they traded the very building blocks of culture. Picture a Bronze Age caravan winding along the Silk Road's precursors, its donkeys laden with copper ingots and lapis lazuli. Alongside these treasures, something far lighter but equally precious traveled: symbols etched into clay tokens or scratched onto wooden tallies. These weren't mere ownership marks, they were a universal currency of understanding. A trader from the Indus Valley could meet a counterpart from Mesopotamia, and though their spoken languages might clash, a circle crossed by lines, the symbol for cloth bridged the gap instantly. Archaeologists have found identical tally marks on pottery shards in Oman and Mesopotamia, separated by thousands of miles yet united by commerce. The genius of these symbols lay in their simplicity. A jar of olive oil might bear 3 horizontal lines, not just to count quantities but to signify quality grades. A primitive barcode system. In Anatolia, merchants used animal symbols as brand logos. A stag stamp meant leather from a specific herd, while a fish glyph guaranteed seafood preserved by coastal experts. This wasn't just practical, it built trust. When a Hittite merchant unrolled a bundle marked with the sun symbol of Egypt's Amun cult, buyers knew the linen inside was temple-grade, blessed and authentic. Symbols became contracts, receipts, and advertising all in one. What's astonishing is how far these marks traveled. A symbol for wine first carved in the Caucasus appears centuries later on Minoan storage jars, then pops up in Levantine shipwrecks. Like viral memes of the ancient world, successful symbols spread because they worked. The comb-shaped mark for wool jumped from Mesopotamian tablets to Cypriot loom weights, then sailed with Phoenician traders to Carthage. Each adoption added slight variations of proof that this wasn't mindless copying but active adaptation. The real game changer: portability. Unlike bulky stone inscriptions, tiny clay tokens could fit in a pouch. Archaeologists find them scattered like ancient business cards at trade hubs. Some were even baked into clay envelopes called bulli. Break one open, and the tokens inside revealed debts or promises, like a Bronze Age escrow system. At Kanish in Turkey, thousands of these bulli document an entire Assyrian merchant colony's operations, showing how symbols tracked everything from interest rates to shipping delays. But trade routes did more than spread symbols, they blended them. In the bustling markets of Ugarit, a hybrid script emerged, mixing Mesopotamian signs with local innovations. A dolphin symbol borrowed from Aegean traders might sit beside a Hittite glyph for tax-exempt, creating a pidgin language of commerce. This cultural alchemy didn't just facilitate deals, it sparked creativity. The famous Proto-Sinaitic script, ancestor of the alphabet, likely emerged when Canaanite miners simplified Egyptian hieroglyphs to keep mine records proof that necessity plus cultural collision breeds invention. The ultimate testament to this system's power, its redundancy. Even when empires fell and languages vanished, the symbols persisted. After the Bronze Age collapse, when Linear B script disappeared in Greece, traders kept using simple tally marks for olive oil and grain. In crisis, humanity fell back on what worked, those universal shapes that required no translator. Today's global supply chains, with their ISO symbols and hazard pictograms, aren't so different. The same impulse that made a Harappan merchant carve a unicorn symbol on a seal now makes us recognize a recycling logo at a glance. Some languages of the eye transcend time. High in the Andes, where thin air turns breath to mist, ancient herders carved symbols of condors and pumas into stone, not just as art but as survival guides. These peaks demanded different marks than the floodplains of Mesopotamia. A jagged line here didn't mean water. It mapped treacherous mountain passes, warning travelers where landslides might strike. Meanwhile, along the Nile's fertile banks, farmers etched fat spirals into pottery, each curve celebrating the river's life-giving floods. The same symbol in the Indus Valley took on sharper angles, reflecting monsoon rains that arrived in violent bursts rather than Egypt's predictable inundations. This wasn't inconsistency, it was ingenuity, proof that the script breathed with the land itself. What's striking is how these regional tweaks coexisted with a stable core. The sun symbol, whether carved by Inca priests or Mesopotamian scribes, kept its basic circle and raised shape across continents, but local flavors emerged like dialects. In Scandinavia, where winter darkness loomed, solar glyphs sprouted extra rays, almost pleading for light. Desert tribes added wavy underlines to signify mirages, while island cultures like Crete's Minoans enclosed symbols in sea blue pigments. These adaptations weren't random. They reflected what each community valued most. A reindeer herder in Siberia needed marks for migration routes. A Mycenaean wine merchant required symbols for vintage years. The script's genius lay in its framework, flexible enough to accommodate local needs, yet structured enough to remain intelligible across regions. Archaeologists trace these variations through unexpected details. The bull symbol, widespread from Spain to India, reveals subtle shifts in horn curvature. Mesopotamian versions are stout and curved, while Anatolian renditions stand straight as daggers, mirroring regional breeding practices. Even colors carried meaning. Ochre red symbols in Australian rock art often signaled sacred sites, while the same marks in black charcoal denoted practical waypoints. This chromatic coding hints at an early grasp of semiotics, the understanding that context changes meaning. Yet beneath these surface differences, a profound unity endured. When drought struck, disparate cultures independently added tear-shaped marks to their water symbols, as if grief had its own universal grammar. Birth and death were marked worldwide by concentric circles, perhaps echoing the womb's shape or the ripple of a life's impact. These shared intuitions suggest something deeper than cultural exchange, a collective human psyche finding similar solutions to universal struggles. The script's resilience came from this balance, like a tree whose roots stay anchored while its branches adapt to each new environment. Coastal traders simplified symbols for speed, etching them onto driftwood tags. Mountain dwellers exaggerated certain lines for visibility across snowy distances. River cultures developed waterproof inks to keep records during floods. Every innovation strengthened the system, proving that the most enduring languages aren't rigid, but living, shaped by the hands that use them and the landscapes they describe. The symbols etched into temple walls weren't mere decorations. They were portals to the unseen. In the dim glow of oil lamps, priests traced sacred shapes onto altar stones, each curve and line a whispered prayer made solid. At Çatalhöyük, archaeologists uncovered a shrine where every symbol clustered around a bull's skull, the marks pulsing outward like ripples, some for fertility, others to ward off evil spirits. What's haunting is how these rituals transcended geography. A spiral carved into a Scottish megalith mirrored the same pattern Mayan healers used to map the soul's journey. This wasn't coincidence, it was humanity grasping for the divine through shared visual poetry. Healers wielded symbols like surgeons wield scalpels, In Anatolia, shamans pressed clay amulets marked with crossed lines against fevered brows, believing the geometry could trap illness. Half a world away, Ojibwe medicine men drew nearly identical symbols in healing sand paintings, their curves meant to redirect harmful energies. The parallels are uncanny, not because cultures copied one another, but because the human mind, faced with suffering, instinctively reached for order in shapes. Even the materials held power. Red ochre for life's blood in Australian Aboriginal rites, lapis lazuli dust for celestial connection in Babylonian incantations. Every pigment and stroke was a covenant with forces beyond sight. Prophecy and symbols were inseparable. At Delphi, priestesses interpreted visions alongside carved omens, their trances guided by serpentine marks older than the temple itself. In China's Shang dynasty, oracle bones cracked along pre-etched lines, the fractures reading like a divine script. What's striking is how these practices democratized the mystical. Unlike later written languages guarded by elites, ritual symbols were often communal. Villagers could read weather warnings in cloud-like carvings or protection charms above doorways. This accessibility made the sacred feel personal, immediate. Yet some marks were considered too potent for casual use. The swastika, a solar symbol across Hindu, Norse, and Native American traditions, was reserved for rites of passage, its spinning arms believed to harness cosmic energy. Similarly, Egyptian hieroglyphs of the Eye of Horus weren't just art. They functioned as active wards, their presence on tomb walls a perpetual shield against decay. Modern imaging reveals how these symbols were often retraced over centuries, each renewal a collective act of faith in their enduring power. The script's near disappearance reads like a cautionary tale. As phonetic writing rose, these sacred symbols were either absorbed or abandoned. In Mesopotamia, temple marks blurred into cuneiform wedge shapes. In Mesoamerica, Spanish colonizers burned codices, erasing millennia of spiritual shorthand. Only in hidden corners did fragments survive. In Kan Kipu knots tucked away from priests, Celtic ogam stones buried beneath churchyards. Their resilience hints at something profound. Even when cultures fracture, the human urge to touch the transcendent through symbols remains unbroken. War and time are merciless archivists. When the Assyrian Empire collapsed, when Babylon's libraries burned, when Roman legions razed temples, each conquest didn't just topple cities, it erased chapters of this visual language. Archaeologists sifting through Nineveh's ruins found tablets deliberately smashed, their symbols fractured into cryptic shards. But the greatest threat wasn't violence, it was indifference. As phonetic writing spread, these ancient signs seemed quaint, even primitive. Scribes melted down old tablets to reuse the clay, pressing new cuneiform over forgotten symbols like palimpsests of cultural memory. Entire administrative archives were repurposed as rubble filler in walls, their messages buried beneath later generations' feet. Natural disasters played their part too. Earthquakes along the Anatolian fault line shattered entire libraries into jigsaw puzzles of clay. Floods in the Indus Valley dissolved unfired tablets back into mud, taking with them the last traces of merchant contracts and moon rituals. Even climate conspired against preservation. Symbols carved into Saharan rock faces faded under relentless sun, while jungle humidity in Mesoamerica devoured bark paper codices. What survives today is often accidental. A merchant's fired clay receipt tossed as trash but preserved when a bakery fire hardened it, or votive tablets sealed beneath temple foundations as offerings to gods who proved better archivists than humans. Yet in scattered corners, the script clung to life. Remote mountain villages in Armenia kept using solar symbols to mark cheese aging caves, unaware of their link to Bronze Age sun cults. Polynesian navigators preserved star compass patterns nearly identical to Neolithic European petroglyphs, passed down through chance rather than clay. Most remarkably, the Toda people of India's Nilgiri hills still carve sacred buffalo symbols almost indistinguishable from those found at Harappa 4,000 years prior, a thread of continuity thinner than a hair but unbroken. The script's rediscovery reads like a detective story. In the 1840s, a British officer stationed in Kurdistan noticed locals using strange marks to tally sheep, marks that matched fragments in the British Museum's unstudied collection. Decades later, a French archaeologist decoding cuneiform in Iraq stumbled upon older tablets beneath palace floors, their symbols more pictorial, like ghost writing beneath the wedges. These chance encounters sparked a race to salvage what remained before modernization erased the last living echoes. What emerged wasn't just a lost script, it was a mirror showing how fragile civilization's memory can be and how resilient its deepest symbols prove. Walking through the hushed halls of the British Museum, you'll find glass cases holding unassuming clay tablets, each one a time capsule from humanity's first experiments with visual language. What's remarkable isn't just their age, but how these fragile artifacts are being given new life. Advanced climate-controlled displays now protect them from humidity, while subtle LED lighting reveals faded symbols invisible under ordinary bulbs. But preservation isn't just about locking treasures away. The Louvre's recent Touch the Past initiative lets visitors handle 3D printed replicas of Mesopotamian tablets, their fingers tracing the same grooves ancient scribes carved 4,000 years ago. This tactile connection bridges millennia, turning distant history into something intimate and immediate. Beyond physical museums, digital archives are revolutionizing access. The Cuneiform Digital Library Initiative has scanned over 400,000 tablets, from royal decrees to grocery lists, making them searchable with a click. A researcher in Tokyo can now compare a symbol on her screen with identical marks found in Berlin's collections, spotting regional variations in real time. Even more groundbreaking are the algorithms analyzing these scans. One project at Oxford uses pattern recognition software to identify scribble handwriting, proving that a single symbol carved with a confident stroke versus a hesitant scratch can reveal the writer's social status or even emotional state. Suddenly, these aren't just ancient records, they're windows into living, breathing individuals. The most democratic transformation, crowdsourcing platforms like Global Glyphs, where anyone can help decode undeciphered symbols. A retired teacher in Canada recently matched a recurring fish motif on Indus Valley seals to monsoon records, proving they were seasonal almanacs. High school students in Brazil crowdsourced translations of Minoan pottery marks by comparing them to modern fishing community tallies. This collective effort isn't just accelerating research, it's democratizing it, proving that breakthroughs don't always come from ivory towers. The British Museum's Scan the World project even invites gamers to virtually reassemble shattered tablets, turning artifact restoration into a collaborative puzzle. What emerges from these efforts is more than preservation, it's resurrection. Multispectral imaging has uncovered ghost tablets beneath palimpsests, where later scribes scraped away older symbols to reuse the clay. In one stunning case, a hymn to a forgotten goddess was recovered from beneath a Roman shopping list. Meanwhile, blockchain technology now guards against forgery, with each symbol's provenance etched into immutable digital ledgers. These innovations ensure that even if the original clay crumbles, the knowledge it carries won't vanish again. The real magic lies in how these ancient marks are leaping from museum cases into living culture. In Berlin's News Museum, an augmented reality app overlays animations onto static symbols. A carved ox suddenly paws the ground. A static sunburst begins to pulse with light. Visitors leave not just educated but enchanted, understanding viscerally what textbooks can't convey, that these weren't dead scratches but a vibrant, evolving language. As digital archives grow and crowdsourcing expands, we're not just saving the world's first script, we're giving it new voices, new interpreters, and a future as dynamic as its past. A graffiti artist in Berlin sprays a swirling sun symbol onto a concrete wall, the same motif their ancestors carved into Mesopotamian clay 6,000 years earlier. Across the ocean, a jewelry designer in New Mexico crafts pendants based on ancient water glyphs, their curves echoing both prehistoric petroglyphs and modern sound waves. This isn't just homage, it's reinvention. Contemporary creators aren't copying these symbols, they're collaborating with them, weaving threads of primal visual language into the fabric of today's art. Take the murals transforming cityscapes from Mexico City to Melbourne. What began as archaeological fascination has become a global movement where spiral motifs from Neolithic Europe merge with street art's bold colors, telling old stories with new urgency. One striking example, a mural in Lisbon's Alfama district blends Phoenician trade symbols with QR codes, inviting viewers to scan and hear the layered history behind each mark. The resonance isn't accidental. Tattoo artists report surging demand for designs based on these ancient scripts, not as exotic decoration, but as personal talismans. A nurse in Toronto chooses a Hittite healing symbol for her wrist. A veteran in Tokyo inks Anatolian protection glyphs alongside his service dates. The appeal lies in their universality. Unlike text tied to a specific language, these shapes communicate directly to the subconscious. Psychologists note how clients describe feeling an instant connection to symbols they've never academically studied, as if the forms themselves whisper across generations. Beyond skin and walls, the script thrives in unexpected mediums. Digital artists animate symbols for music videos, making Bronze Age harvest dances pulse to electronic beats. Architects incorporate geometric motifs from Indus Valley seals into building facades, their patterns optimizing light just as they once organized temple spaces. Even fashion designers like Iris van Herpen have laser-cut gowns with cuneiform-inspired perforations, transforming wearers into walking artifacts. What unites these diverse interpretations is a shared intuition that revisiting humanity's first visual language isn't nostalgia, but a way to reclaim something essential about how we process meaning. The most profound impact, however, may be in how these artistic revivals challenge assumptions about the script's primitive nature. When a calligrapher like Hassan Masoudi blends Arabic script with Mesopotamian symbols, or when Chinese ink painter Zhu Bing invents pseudo-glyphs for his installations, they expose the fluid boundary between ancient and modern expression. A single exhibit might juxtapose a 3D printed replica of a Sumerian tablet with an AI-generated mural that evolves based on viewer heartbeats, proof that these symbols still pulse with potential. Far from being static relics, they've become a living lexicon, adaptable as the day they were first pressed into wet clay. This creative resurgence does more than beautify, it democratizes. While museums preserve the originals under glass, artists scatter their essence across subway trains and smartphone cases, ensuring the script belongs not just to scholars but to street vendors and school children. A teenager might encounter a Minoan dolphin symbol on a skateboard deck long before seeing it in a textbook, sparking curiosity no lecture could match. In this way, the circle closes. What began as communal expression millennia ago has returned to the people, evolving yet unmistakably familiar, like a melody remembered in fragments, now sung anew. For over a century, linguists assumed writing evolved in a straight line from pictures to sounds, from concrete to abstract. The discovery of this ancient visual script shattered that simplicity like a hammer through clay. Here was a system that thrived for millennia without ever developing phonetic elements, proving that writing could have taken radically different paths. What if civilizations had continued refining pictorial symbols instead of inventing alphabets? We might have ended up with a global emoji-like language, where a single crescent moon could convey everything from nighttime to dreams to lunar deities, all without a single sound attached. This realization sent shockwaves through linguistic circles, forcing scholars to reconsider the very definition of writing. Cognitive scientists now study these symbols like a fossil record of human thought. When researchers at Cambridge analyzed how volunteers interpreted ancient glyphs versus modern words, they found something remarkable. Pictorial symbols activated both language centers and visual processing areas simultaneously, proof that early writing wasn't just a tool for communication, but a bridge between seeing and thinking. Children exposed to these shapes in experiments intuitively grasped meanings faster than phonetic letters, suggesting our brains might be wired for visual language at a fundamental level. The implications are profound. If neural pathways favor symbols, why did most cultures abandon them for sound-based systems? The answer may lie in trade rather than biology. Phonetic writing allowed faster record-keeping for bustling markets, prioritizing efficiency over universality. Yet the script's influence lingers in unexpected ways. Modern logographic systems like Chinese characters retain pictorial roots, while traffic signs and emojis prove we still rely on instant visual comprehension. Linguist Dr. Naomi Chen's groundbreaking work shows how emoji sequences mirror ancient symbol grammar. A heart followed by a broken glass doesn't just mean sadness. It constructs a narrative arc, much like how a bull glyph plus a sun symbol once told entire creation myths. This parallel suggests that beneath the surface of every tweet and text message, humanity keeps circling back to its earliest communicative instincts. The most contentious debate revolves around whether these symbols qualify as true writing. Traditionalists argue real writing must represent speech, while revisionists point to the script's ability to record complex legal contracts and poetry without phonetic cues. The truth likely lies in between, like sign languages that convey abstract concepts through motion and space. This visual system operated on its own sophisticated logic. A single symbol could function as a word, a metaphor, or even a pun, the ancient equivalent of a viral meme. What fascinates researchers most are the outlier symbols that defy categorization. Zigzags that sometimes mean water, other times conflict, and occasionally serve as mathematical notations reveal a fluidity modern writing lacks. Perhaps the script's greatest gift to linguistics is humility. It reminds us that every writing system represents a cultural choice, not an inevitable progression. The next time you send a heart emoji or glance at a restroom icon, remember, you're participating in an experiment that began when someone first pressed a thumb into wet clay and discovered that shapes could carry the weight of a soul. Deep in the archives of the British Museum, tucked between deciphered tablets and well-documented artifacts, lies a clay fragment labeled Unknown Script #347. Its surface is crowded with symbols that defy every translation attempt. A jagged line cradling a cluster of dots, a shape like a branching tree but with roots that spiral unnaturally. This isn't some obscure outlier. Similar untranslated marks appear on artifacts from Malta to Mongolia, haunting researchers like linguistic ghosts, the most frustrating part. These aren't random scratches. Their deliberate placement, often near administrative records or ritual objects, hints they held weighty significance. One prevailing theory suggests they functioned as ancient inside jokes or memes, visual puns understood only by initiates. A symbol that looks like a grinning fish on Mesopotamian tavern, receipts might have signaled paid in full to bartenders while leaving tax collectors baffled. Then there are the symbols that change meaning like shape-shifters. Take the recurring eye-hand motif found in both Anatolian shrines and Indus Valley seals. In some contexts, it appears alongside grain measures, possibly denoting fair trade. Elsewhere, it's carved above temple doorways, perhaps warding against envy. But on a recently excavated amulet from Cyprus, the same symbol is paired with what looks like a laughing face, leaving scholars wondering, was this sacred, satirical, or something we've entirely failed to grasp? The variability isn't a flaw in the script, it's evidence of its living, breathing complexity. These weren't static characters in a textbook, but dynamic tools that bent to circumstance. Technology is rewriting the rules of decipherment. At the University of Chicago, a team fed thousands of untranslated symbols into an AI trained on pattern recognition. The algorithm flagged a peculiar cluster, 3 triangles stacked like a pyramid, that appeared exclusively on tablets found near copper mines. Cross-referencing with ancient trade routes revealed these marks matched periods of metal shortages, suggesting they might have been Bronze Age, out-of-stock notices. Meanwhile, in Turkey, spectral imaging exposed faint symbols beneath later cuneiform, including a recurring spiral that always appears near records of lunar eclipses. Could this have been an ancient breaking news glyph for celestial events? The greatest untapped resource might lie beneath our feet. Less than 10% of known Neolithic sites have been thoroughly excavated, and climate change is unveiling new clues as glaciers recede. In Norway's melting ice patches, hikers recently discovered a wooden tally stick covered in symbols identical to those from Mesopotamia, a find that could rewrite theories about Bronze Age globalization. Underwater archaeology offers another frontier. When divers explored a sunken merchant ship off Crete, they found lead ingots stamped with symbols previously seen only in landlocked regions, proving trade connections far more extensive than records suggested. What keeps researchers awake at night are the orphaned symbols, marks so unique they appear on just one artifact. A pottery shard from ancient Jericho bears a single symbol resembling a flying bird, yet nothing like it exists in any catalogue. Was this a personal signature, a forgotten deity's emblem, or a trial mark that never caught on? The silence of these lone symbols is deafening, reminding us how much context has been lost to time. The most humbling realization: some symbols may never be solved in a modern sense. Their meanings could have been fluid by design, understood intuitively by cultures that didn't share our obsession with fixed definitions. Like a wink or a shrug, their power lay in ambiguity, in the spaces between what was drawn and what was felt. This isn't a failure of scholarship, it's an invitation to approach these marks not as puzzles to crack, but as echoes of minds that experienced reality differently. What's certain is that every untranslated symbol is a door left ajar. Behind them could lie anything from mundane shopping lists to revelations that upend our understanding of early science, religion, or social structures. The next time a farmer's plow unearths a strange marked stone or a satellite image reveals a buried settlement, another piece of this 10,000-year-old conversation might finally find its voice. Scholars studying these ancient symbols stand on the brink of discoveries that would have been unimaginable a generation ago. Artificial intelligence is revolutionizing the field, not by replacing human intuition, but by amplifying it. Imagine algorithms trained on every known symbol across continents, spotting connections no single researcher could memorize. At MIT, a neural network recently identified 73 previously unnoticed variants of the sun symbol by analyzing subtle curvature patterns in thousands of images. These aren't just statistical quirks, they're regional dialects of visual language, waiting to tell us how trade routes shifted or how climate altered cultural expression. The oceans hold perhaps the most tantalizing possibilities. When divers explored a Bronze Age shipwreck off Uluburan, they found wax tablets preserved in sediment, a reminder that coastal cities likely traded written records alongside spices and metals. Marine archaeologists now use submersible drones equipped with laser scanners to search for submerged settlements where rising seas might have swallowed entire libraries. Early scans near India's Gulf of Combat showed geometric structures that could be warehouses full of inscribed tablets, their clay hardened rather than dissolved by salt water. Interdisciplinary approaches are tearing down academic silos. Chemists analyzing residue on ritual tablets in Turkey detected traces of hallucinogenic compounds, explaining why certain symbols appear distorted or pulsing in ways that match psychedelic visions. Meanwhile, astrophysicists cross-referencing celestial symbols with ancient eclipse records have pinpointed previously unknown astronomical events, like a massive solar storm around 1596 BC that might have inspired fiery deity motifs across 3 continents. Soil science offers another key. Advanced spectrometry can now detect microscopic clay particles unique to specific river systems. When researchers tested Mesopotamian tablets in Berlin's museum collection, they discovered some originated hundreds of miles from their attributed locations, proof of long-distance scribble exchanges or perhaps even ancient forgery networks. This same technology might finally solve the Vinci symbols debate, determining whether markings on Balkan artifacts represent true writing or ritual decoration by analyzing the tools that made them. The most exciting frontier may be cognitive archaeology. At Stanford, volunteers in brain scanners view ancient symbols while researchers monitor neural activity. Early results show that abstract marks like spirals activate the same visual processing areas as modern logos, while representational symbols like animals trigger language centers evidence that our brains still process these images as both art and language simultaneously. Such findings could reshape how we teach children to read or design universal signage. What makes this moment extraordinary isn't just the tools, but the collaborative spirit fueling discovery. A crowdsourcing project called Glyph Quest lets anyone tag symbols in digitized artifacts, leading an amateur in Norway to recently match Minoan shipping marks with linear tablets, a connection professionals had overlooked. Museums worldwide are now pooling 3D scans into open-source databases, creating a global Rosetta Cloud, where an archaeologist in Peru can compare findings with a linguist in Tokyo in real time. The next decade promises more than incremental progress. We're on the verge of paradigm shifts. Imagine decoding symbols fast enough to read a tablet's contents while still excavating it, or using AI to simulate how symbols might have evolved had phonetic writing not dominated. Every undeciphered mark is a locked door, and humanity finally holds a ring of keys. As these doors swing open, we won't just learn about ancient civilizations, we'll rediscover forgotten ways of seeing, thinking, and sharing meaning that might profoundly enrich our own. Every time you send a heart emoji or instantly recognize a restroom sign in an unfamiliar airport, you're tapping into a primal language older than civilization itself. Those tiny digital icons on your phone screen, they're the direct descendants of symbols first carved into mammoth tusks and cave walls. The ancient script we've been exploring isn't just a relic, it's alive in the way we navigate modern life. Street signs, app interfaces, emergency exit markers, they all rely on the same immediate visual understanding that made those early symbols so powerful. What began as scratches in clay has evolved into the silent infrastructure of our hyper-connected world. Consider how corporations spend millions testing logo designs. When Apple chose a bitten fruit or Twitter settled on that stylized bird, they weren't just picking pretty pictures, they were harnessing the same neural pathways that made a sun symbol universally understood 10,000 years ago. Neurological studies show our brains process simple symbols like the Wi-Fi icon or recycling logo in under 100 milliseconds faster than we can read words. This isn't modern innovation, it's biological inheritance. Those early humans who first drew a wavy line for water or a circle for the sun were mapping the very way our visual cortex organizes information. The script's true relevance shines in moments of crisis or cross-cultural connection. During the 2020 COVID pandemic, countries worldwide used nearly identical pictograms to communicate safety protocols: hands washing, masks being worn, distances kept. No translation needed. Similarly, when refugees arrive in foreign lands, visual guides help them find food, medical care, and shelter long before language barriers fall. These situations reveal what archaeologists have long understood. When stripped to essentials, humanity keeps returning to the same visual solutions. A red circle with a line through it still means prohibited, whether it's painted on a Neolithic burial site or a modern no-smoking sign. But this ancient system offers more than practical utility. It's a mirror showing our shared humanity. In an era of polarized narratives and digital echo chambers, these symbols remind us that certain experiences transcend time and culture. The same spiral that represented life's cyclical nature to Celtic druids still comforts hospice patients in Japanese palliative care wards. A mother rocking a baby recognizes the universal infant symbol carved on Bronze Age amulets without explanation. These continuities suggest something profound. Beneath the surface differences of language and technology, we still see the world in remarkably similar ways. Perhaps most importantly, this script challenges our assumptions about progress. We assume writing evolved from pictures to alphabets as some inevitable improvement, but what if that's backwards? Chinese characters retained their pictorial elements while developing one of history's most sophisticated literary traditions. Emoji use explodes globally despite, or because of, their resemblance to ancient pictographs. Maybe those early creators weren't primitive but prescient, designing a system that aligns with how our brains naturally process information. As we stand on the brink of augmented reality interfaces and neural implants, their solution, simple shapes carrying layered meanings, might prove more future-proof than we ever imagined. The next time you absent-mindedly tap a thumbs-up reaction or follow airport symbols to baggage claim, pause for a moment. You're not just using convenient design, you're participating in the oldest continuous human experiment, one that began when someone first pressed a finger into wet clay and realized shapes could outlive voices. In our age of information overload, these ancient symbols offer a gift we're only beginning to appreciate anew: the power to say more with less, to connect across divides, and to embed meaning in marks that endure. You don't need a degree in archaeology to become part of this ancient story, just curiosity and a willingness to look closer. Start by visiting your local museum's ancient history wing. Those unassuming clay fragments in glass cases, lean in. Notice how a single symbol repeats across artifacts from different cultures, or how the strokes vary between regions. Many museums now offer augmented reality features. Hold your phone over a display, and watch as symbols animate with their original meanings. Better yet, join a curator-led workshop where you can handle 3D printed replicas, tracing the same grooves ancient scribes carved millennia ago. The British museums adopt a symbol program, even let you sponsor the conservation of specific tablets, receiving updates when new translations emerge from your artifact. Online communities have turned decipherment into a global team sport. Platforms like Zooniverse host Ancient Lives projects where anyone can transcribe Greek papyri or tag symbols in digitized Mesopotamian tablets. A retired nurse in New Zealand recently spotted a recurring cluster of dots on Indus Valley seals that scholars had overlooked. Her discovery linked them to lunar calendars. Discord servers buzz with amateur linguists debating whether a particular spiral represents seasons or spiritual cycles, pooling knowledge from archaeology blogs, satellite maps, and even farming manuals. Reddit's r/ancient symbols crowdsources interpretations, with members cross-referencing symbols against tattoo archives, textile patterns, and cave art databases. The most exciting part, you might stumble on a connection professionals missed. For hands-on adventurers, archaeological digs worldwide welcome volunteers, no experience required. Imagine sifting through soil in Turkey's Göbekli Tepe, where every shard could bear humanity's earliest symbols. Organizations like Earthwatch pair beginners with experts, teaching how to clean, catalog, and even 3D scan finds. One teenager volunteering in Crete found a seal stone with a unique dolphin motif that reshaped theories about Minoan trade routes. Even if travel isn't possible, virtual digs like the University of California's Dig at Home let you analyze excavation photos from your couch, flagging potential symbols for further study. Want to make a lasting impact? Support digs through crowdfunding platforms like Experiment, where small donations help fund spectral imaging or soil analysis. A recent campaign raised enough to scan a cache of Anatolian tablets, revealing invisible symbols that doubled the known vocabulary of a lost merchant dialect. Or advocate for endangered sites. Global heritage nonprofits train volunteers to monitor looting threats using satellite imagery, protecting symbols still buried. The simplest way to connect: learn a handful of symbols and weave them into your daily life. Sketch the ancient sun glyph in your planner to mark important dates, or use the Mesopotamian grain symbol as a grocery list shorthand. Share them with kids. Children's brains intuitively grasp pictorial systems, and you might spark a lifelong passion. When you recognize these shapes in modern logos or street signs, you'll realize something profound: this script never died. It just evolved, and now you've become part of its next chapter. Think of this ancient visual script as humanity's first shared operating system, a silent revolution that turned gestures into lasting marks and scattered thoughts into collective memory. Those early symbols weren't just tools, they were the scaffolding of civilization itself. Picture a marketplace in ancient Ur, where traders from distant lands haggled not with words but with clay tokens stamped with bulls and wheat sheaves. A single symbol could bridge language gaps, seal contracts, or warn of droughts. This was more than communication. It was the birth of trust etched in clay. What's astonishing is how these shapes transcended their original purposes. A spiral carved into a temple wall might track seasons for farmers, signal spiritual rebirth for priests, and guide sailors by the stars all at once. Unlike modern alphabets locked to specific sounds, these symbols were fluid, adapting like water to the contours of each culture. Archaeologists find nearly identical sun glyphs in Scottish stone circles and Mayan codices, not because of contact but because some ideas, light, warmth, time, are universal. Now technology is peeling back layers we never thought possible. AI algorithms have detected subtle variations in symbol strokes that reveal individual scribes' personalities, the Bronze Age equivalent of handwriting analysis. In Turkey, multispectral imaging exposed a merchant's desperate prayer for safe passage, hidden beneath a routine inventory list. These discoveries aren't just filling gaps in history, they're proving that ancient minds were as nuanced as our own. A tablet's hurried marks might record a trader's frustration with delayed shipments, while a carefully incised hymn captures a composer's reverence. The script's afterlife is equally remarkable. That corporate logo you recognize instantly, its simplicity leans on the same visual grammar that made a bull symbol legible from Mesopotamia to the Indus Valley. Emojis, street signs, even emergency exit markers, they all inherit the DNA of those first glyphs. Neuroscientists confirm our brains still process these shapes faster than text, a legacy hardwired by millennia of pictographic thinking. Yet the most profound takeaway isn't about the past, it's about human potential. When disaster struck ancient cities, when libraries burned or empires collapsed, these symbols endured. They survived not in vaults but in the hands of potters marking vessels, children scratching lessons in mud, and elders tracing rituals in sand. Their resilience whispers a challenge to our digital age. What will we create that lasts 10,000 years? As we stand at the brink of AI and virtual worlds, those early scribes remind us that the most powerful technology isn't the fanciest tool, it's the idea that outlives its creator. Now, let's tackle the questions simmering in your minds. Was this script truly global? Did children learn it the way we learn math? And could anyone, even you, start deciphering undiscovered symbols today? Was this script truly a global phenomenon? The evidence suggests a fascinating patchwork rather than a single universal system. From the caves of Lascaux to the river valleys of China, similar symbols emerged independently like cultural lightning strikes, not because of some lost super-civilization, but because human minds facing similar challenges arrived at parallel solutions. A farmer in Mesopotamia needing to track sheep inventories and a herder in the Andes recording llama births both instinctively reached for tally marks. Archaeologists call this convergent symbolic evolution, and it's why we find sun symbols from Scandinavia to the Sahara, their rays stretching across geography like connective threads. But crucially, these systems weren't identical. The zigzag that meant water to a desert-dwelling Nabatean might signify a mountain pass to an alpine trader. This adaptability, this willingness to let symbols breathe and shift with local needs was the script's real genius. Learning this ancient language today is far easier than you'd think. Start with the British Museum's free online cuneiform courses, where you'll practice tracing symbols that once dictated laws and love poems. For hands-on learners, the Louvre's weekend workshops provide replica clay and styluses, letting you experience the tactile thrill of pressing a bull symbol into damp earth, just as an apprentice scribe would have 4,000 years ago. Even children can join the fun. The Metropolitan Museum of Art's Cartouches and Cookies program teaches hieroglyphic variants of these early symbols through edible clay and chocolate tablet artifacts. The key is to approach it as our ancestors did, not as rigid grammar to memorize, but as a living toolkit for expression. Fictional depictions have breathed new life into these symbols, though rarely with historical precision. The video game Assassin's Creed Origins recreates Ptolemaic Egypt's hieroglyphs with startling accuracy, while the Sign of the Queen's fantasy novels weave an entirely new pictographic language inspired by Indus Valley seals. Even Hollywood gets occasional nods, right? The Alien script in Arrival deliberately echoes the non-linear, concept-first approach of early symbolic systems. These creative interpretations matter because they reintroduce ancient visual thinking to modern audiences, proving that these shapes still resonate at a gut level. What lingers after exploring this script isn't just admiration for its complexity, but humility before its humanity. Every wavy line and sunburst was someone's solution to a problem we still face: how to make our inner worlds visible to others. When you next pause before a traffic sign or send a heart emoji, remember, you're part of an unbroken chain stretching back to that first moment when a hand pressed against a cave wall left its mark and said without words, "This is real." This matters. The script that predates writing didn't just record information, it taught us how to be human together across time. From cryptic carvings to digital archives, this script's journey is a testament to human ingenuity, not just in its creation, but in our relentless drive to understand it. Think about that for a moment. A single wavy line pressed into clay by someone who lived 6,000 years ago can still spark recognition in your brain today. That's more than communication, it's time travel. These symbols connect us to minds that saw the same sun, feared the same storms, and celebrated the same harvests, bridging millennia with nothing but shapes. What's astonishing isn't just the script's endurance, but how it reshapes our modern assumptions. We pride ourselves on living in the information age, yet our ancestors built a system so versatile it recorded tax receipts, love poems, and star charts without a single phonetic letter. Their solution, visual shorthand, might be more relevant now than ever. In a world drowning in text, where emojis and logos convey meaning faster than paragraphs, we're circling back to the very principles that made this ancient script revolutionary: simplicity, universality, and the power of an image to carry layers of meaning. The story doesn't end here. Every breakthrough raises new questions. What untranslated symbols hide in overlooked fragments? Could machine learning reconstruct dialects we've never heard? Might underwater archaeology uncover libraries swallowed by rising seas? The script's greatest gift might be its unfinished nature, inviting each generation to contribute their piece to the puzzle. So the next time you tap a heart icon or follow a subway sign, remember, you're part of this unbroken chain. Those early scribes didn't just leave us symbols, they left an invitation to keep reimagining how we share what matters. The adventure continues, and you're holding the next chapter. What mark will you make? Thanks for joining this journey through time. If you've ever wondered how a single shape could carry the weight of centuries, now you know. Don't forget to share your favorite symbol or theory below, and subscribe to uncover more mysteries hiding in plain sight. Until next time, keep looking closer. The past is far from done speaking.